Dear Commissioner, dear members of FutureLab Europe, dear guests, thank you. I'm very pleased to welcome you all to this Future Debate event here in Brussels today. In 2011, when we started FutureLab Europe, our most important issue was to talk about Europe beyond the economic restraints. The debates that we initiated at that time dealt with questions of European identity and with visions and concepts for a common future. We followed the idea that in order to succeed, Europe has to become a project of the citizens and civil society rather than a project of economic experts, of governments and of elites. But in times of economic recession, when the labor market contracts and the number of unemployed people rises sharply, it has become more necessary to talk about economic and social issues. Especially for young people, these times are doubly troubling, not only because they are the first targets of job cuts, but also because their transition from school and university to the job market becomes almost impossible. The European debt and banking crisis have had a devastating impact on youth and unemployment across the region. Millions of young people today face the prospect of becoming a lost generation, living through a lost decade, and many worry that they have no future. Their expectations, in contrast to those of their parents and grandparents, are dominated not by hope but by fear. What future lies ahead of them? The generation of the 20 to 25-year-olds in Europe. How are they coping with the current situation and the future challenges? And what needs to be done to help them facing these challenges? Together with our distinguished guest and keynote speaker, Vice President of the European Commission and EU Commissioner for Competition, Joaquin Almunía, members of FutureLab Europe will discuss about these questions today. We, as foundations and representatives of civil society, are convinced that it is important to deal with this issue because Europe and Europeans simply cannot afford to lose a whole generation of young people who are eager to work, qualify and develop their potential on the personal, professional and social level. If Europe wants to maintain its competitiveness as well as its social stability, this problem has to be tackled now, not only in the member states, but also here in Brussels. Young people might not represent the biggest proportion of voters within our aging European societies, but young people of today are those whom we expect to pay our European debts tomorrow. And it is the young generation that we expect to continue our European project. Therefore, governments, economic, social and educational players throughout Europe should join forces, learn and benefit from good ideas and practices, and be ready to make contributions to change Europe's lost generation into a generation of hopes and opportunities. FutureLab Europe is an initiative of European civil society, and it is dedicated to the future of the European project. In 2011, 10 foundations from different countries of Europe joined forces and decided to make their contribution. On the initiative of the Körber Foundation from Germany that I represent today, these foundations grouped together in the European Alliance for Democratic Citizenship and set up FutureLab Europe as the common project with the European Policy Center as the operating partner. FutureLab Europe brings together young citizens of Europe from the networks of the Foundation Alliance who offer great potential for Europe. It provides young Europeans with a platform to develop and exchange ideas and approaches. It helps them to strengthen the voice and making it heard. I look forward to our debate about the lost generation within the next 2 hours, and to the following reception, where we will be able to enter into a further dialogue about what we have heard during the Europe debate today. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Sven Tetzlaff. My name is Michiel van Hulten. I'm the course leader of FutureLab Europe at the European Policy Center. Thank you all for coming to what is now a tradition, because it's the second annual spring debate organized by FutureLab Europe here at Scotland House. Last year we had Commissioner Malmström, who spoke with the group, and this year we're honored to have Vice President Almunía with us. As Sven Tetzlaff pointed out, FutureLab was set up by 10 foundations who believe that in order to succeed, Europe has to be a citizens' project. And FutureLab Europe believes that it can only be a citizens' project if younger generations are signed up to it. And that's why every year we select between 25 and 30 young Europeans from across Europe, both EU and non-EU, to take part in an annual autumn seminar in Brussels, a week-long seminar, which is then followed by a series of national debates and activities such as individual projects, a website where they blog, and other ways where they discuss the European idea. And each generation stays part of this network of FutureLab alumni, and this year we have both the first and second generation present in the room and responsible for the report that's being presented today. Every year the participants themselves decide on a topic for the debate, which is the wider topic they look into during the year. And this year they picked the topic of Europe's lost generation. And for the last 6 months they've been researching and discussing among themselves and finally writing about it, and the result is the report that will be presented to the Vice President today. We will start this afternoon's discussion with an introduction of the report by 2 of the FutureLab participants, also co-authors of the report, Enya Setren from Norway and James Kilcourse from Ireland. They will then hand the first copy of the report to Vice President Almunía, who will then give his response. We're very curious to hear what you have to say about that. And after that, a panel of 3 FutureLab participants will join the Vice President on the stage and lead a question and answer session in which all of you will be invited to join in later as well. Once the debate has reached its natural conclusion, or at 5:55, whichever comes first, I will conclude the debate, and there's then a drink outside the room. The debate is being live streamed on our relaunched website. It was relaunched today, so have a look at it. You can tweet about it using the the hashtag Lost Generation hashtag, and you can also follow us on Twitter at FutureLab Europe. So I thank you all for coming, especially given the fantastic weather today. Really admire the fact that you've chosen to sit in a closed box on the top of a building in Brussels, but I'm sure today's debate is going to be worth it. So without further ado, I'm going to hand over to the presenters of the report, Enya and James.
Thank you, Michiel. My name is James Kilcourse, and I'm from Ireland.
My name is Enya Setren, and I'm from Norway. And together with the rest of the FutureLabbers, we have created a report about the situation of young people in Europe in relation to the crisis. And on the basis of this report, we have developed a policy manifesto with possible solutions directed at the EU member states. And to be able to sum up in 5 minutes how young people in Europe are affected by the crisis might seem like a tough task due to the fact that there have been so many different experiences across Europe and indeed within the individual countries. One significant point that we draw from the reports is that age is not the only determinant factor in the lost generation. Just as important to understand the high disparities of youth unemployment is gender, in addition to social and ethnic background. Another important point is that there is a sharp division between southern and eastern countries on the one side and northern and western countries on the other side. In several of the southern and eastern countries, many young people are concerned about widespread corruption, a perception that in itself can quite easily lead to what we don't want for our future society, discouragement and disengagement. And a related aspect here is also the fear that these disengaged people will turn into the black economy and commit economically motivated crimes. But despite all of these seemingly significant differences, we also have a lot in common in Europe these days when it comes to the challenges that we all face. First and foremost, there was a broad agreement among almost all of the participants that the need level is not perhaps the most important issue, whereas the need defines a young person unemployed and not in education or in training. But the need measure is not able to capture the anxiety and the uncertainty that is such an important factor in the lives of many young Europeans nowadays. Another thing we share is the sense of loss of self-esteem and identity and independence caused by unemployment rates, frequent job changes, and the return to the family institution as a sort of safety net. And this is an increasingly factor that can also be significant when it comes to esteem in a broader perspective. But I think what should worry us the most is the fear and the tendency that some young people are actually feeling that the social contract is broken. They feel a sense of injustice, that they have to deal with a disproportionate burden while the governments don't seem to understand their problems. This has led to a political disconnectedness and apathy, and people feel betrayed by the system. And the question here is what consequences this can have in a long-term perspective. Already evident in this case is the rise of populist political parties and violent demonstrations, which might be a sign that for some young people, they're actually willing to withdraw from the existing framework. And the crucial point here is that the people who are young today are decision makers of tomorrow. So in order to ensure and secure democracy and social structures, we have to ensure the participation of young people in the democratic process. And we have to go even further than what has already been done. We have to take active steps, because failure to act now can lead to increased disillusionments, which can be hard to reverse. Because this is about Europe's youth, which means that this is about the future of Europe.
Thank you, Enya. On the basis of these challenges set out by Enya, and on the basis of the research carried out by all of the FutureLab participants, we've come to the conclusion that profound reform is needed in Europe, and urgently. And we've set out 9 action points in our policy manifesto, which is at the start of the report. But for today, I'm just going to address 3 of the broad points within these 9 points. And the first is simply to reinforce the word crisis, which has increasingly made its way into the language of Europe's leading officials and politicians. For example, in January, Commission President Barroso referred to youth unemployment as a genuine social emergency. And in March, the European Parliament President, Martin Schulz, warned of the threat of social crisis in Europe. He said that Europe has spent billions rescuing its banks, but it may have lost an entire generation of young people in the process. However, in the hierarchy of crises that Europe is currently experiencing, the youth crisis seems to be quite far from the top. The rhetoric of crisis has not yet turned into real action. Governments have not yet mobilized to respond to this crisis in a coordinated and a comprehensive way. It's also worth emphasizing that although Europe's youth are in crisis, this isn't a category that should be, it's not a problem category that should be swept under the carpet. Europe's youth is a very valuable resource. And it's important to emphasize this because many of the participants in the project noted that young people who are trapped in a limbo of unemployment, underemployment, or an endless cycle of education because of inadequate job opportunities, they feel useless and powerless. These were two words that come up quite a lot. So the self-esteem of Europe's young people it has taken a hit, and this isn't good for long-term democratic stability or social cohesion. Political parties and officials must therefore engage young people. They must listen to the concerns of young people and try to involve them more in the decision-making process, particularly when those decisions affect young people. The second key point then is education. It's hard to imagine how Europe in 20 or 30 years' time can compete with the rest of the world without a top-class, highly educated workforce. And yet funding for education and training have been victims of the policy of austerity across Europe. Young people are being deprived of the skills that they need for the workforce, and Europe is depriving itself of what it needs for the future. Related to this then, there is a sense in many European countries that the education system is already failing young people by not providing them with the necessary skills that they need for the future. There's a sharp disconnect in many countries between the education system and the labour market, particularly in countries that place less emphasis on vocational education. So we think that at secondary level there should be better and individualised career guidance for young people from a very early stage. And at third level, tertiary institutions should cooperate more with business and industry to better provide young people with the skills they'll need for the workforce. And they should also provide more individual assistance for graduates who are making the often difficult transition from the world of education to the world of work. And thirdly then, in terms of the labour market itself, many of the policy responses to youth unemployment at national level do not unambiguously serve the long-term interests of young people. For example, flexible employment contracts or subsidised work placements. The scale of the youth unemployment crisis in Europe demands more than just short-term measures that are particularly attractive to employers. They must be combined with much greater support for job seekers in terms of a stronger safety net, re-education and training, and also individual assistance and advice for job seekers. And another important point to emerge in the report, you'll see if you compare the countries, that any major policy response to youth unemployment requires all relevant stakeholders to be on board from the very beginning. So in Denmark, for example, in the 1990s, their very successful labour market reform engaged political parties, trade unions and employers groups from the very start. In Austria, however, a form of a youth unemployment, youth guarantee scheme was introduced a few years ago, and it is still associated very much with one political party. It's seen as a partisan measure, and it doesn't have widespread support. So a comprehensive and a long-term sustainable response to the crisis will mean that all relevant stakeholders have to be brought on board from the very beginning. And finally, on the labour market side, an interesting point that emerged, a phrase that emerged throughout the report to describe Europe's young people was risk averse. It seems that Europe's brightest and most highly educated generation are afraid to take risks, even though they're the ones who are best placed perhaps to benefit and to make the most of the single market and the digital globalized age that we live in. So encouraging entrepreneurship and innovation among young people must be made a priority. And in the report you'll see the response in Latvia, the micro-entrepreneurship scheme, or in Poland, the First Business Programme. They might be considered as potential models for other countries to follow. So the full policy manifesto is at the start of the report, and the report will also provide more information on all the individual countries. The report reflects the fact that employment, education and social policy, the competences for these policy areas lie mainly at nation-state level. However, we believe that the European Commission and the European Parliament have a very important role to play in shining a spotlight on this problem and in coordinating the response by nation states and by member states and by perhaps European candidate countries as well to the challenge. Europe's youth need an advocate at the highest possible level who will champion their cause and who will push national governments away from applying sticking plaster to the problem and towards real crisis management. So, thank you very much. So we'd just like to present Vice President the report.
Thank you very much. Okay, thank you very much. Thank you very much for inviting me this afternoon to be here. Well, listening to the two persons who presented the report, I cannot add many things. It's a very comprehensive report. You have thought a lot. You have a direct experience, more than I have, on the challenges of the youth people, of the present generation, youth generation in Europe. I want to complement the debate with some maybe broader comments about Europe and about the challenges we all are facing. First, congratulations for the work and for the initiative to organize this work. I think it's an extremely useful one, extremely important one. We need to discuss these big challenges, these big issues, based on rigorous analysis, based on open-minded approach, and based on ambition. I think when we are here in Brussels, near these big buildings of the EU institutions, in one of those buildings I work as a member of the Commission during the last 9 years, we need to be aware that the discussions, the debate outside these big buildings are of the essence to move Europe forward. The bureaucracy, the bureaucrats, European institutions, members of the Commission, members of the European Parliament, national governments, when they came here to the other big building to discuss at the Council level, all this is needed. Politics is needed at the European level as it's needed for any kind of democratic life at the national level. But to exchange views between the so-called civil society and the institutions, the democratic institutions, is easier at the national level. In my experience, here in Europe, the European Commission, the European Parliament, we spent a lot of time trying to establish a dialogue with the representatives of the different sectors of our societies, social agents, economic agents, all kinds of stakeholders, NGOs, lobbies, everything. But these kind of public consultations, if I may to say so, being a commissioner, are a little bit bureaucratic. The other part of the consultation, not the European institutions, the other part are not bureaucracies, are not bureaucrats, but the process of consultation to some extent is bureaucratized. This more open dialogue, this more informal exchange of views is absolutely needed. Second point, I think that we were used in the past 10 years to establish a link between a debate on the future of Europe and an institutional debate. For experts in legal issues, in treaty reforms, in treaty provisions, in procedures, this is not the future of Europe. The future of Europe should rely on everyone's future. And the future of our aging population that is increasing. Of course, the future of Europe is the future of the youth generations. By definition, the future of Europe should be linked with the expectations of unemployed people to find a job, of underemployed people to improve the quality of the work they are performing, with the ambitions of our societies. This is the future of Europe. And as you said, today our European societies in general are grim, have fears, uncertainties. We repeat again and again that maybe the future of the next generation will not be as good as was our future when we were the youth in Europe. And maybe this is partially true, maybe. But on the other hand, if I look at the challenges that the Europeans, the 500 million Europeans, will have to face in the coming years, in the coming decades, these challenges are huge, but at the same time are common to all Europeans. So the reasons to believe in Europe, the reasons to support the European project, the reasons to move forward the European integration are more clear now than they were 20 years ago, 25 years ago. It's true that in 1945, at the end of the Second World War, or 1957, when the Treaty of Rome was agreed, the reasons behind the European project were peace, reconciliation between countries that have fought against each other in many occasions, too many occasions, during the past centuries. And these reasons still are present in the European project. The European project is a project of peace and reconciliation. For my generation in Spain, as can be the case for a Portuguese or a Greek of my age, Europe is about democracy and freedom. We wanted to be in Europe because this was the proof that we have reached a democratic system of life, a political system based on democratic values, on human rights, guaranteeing and protecting our freedoms. This was, for us, the main reason to fight for Europe, to be, as the other Europeans, a democracy and a space of freedom and human rights. For those who were living at the other side of the Iron Curtain, Europe was a project of freedom, and the integration in Europe, the enlargement of Europe in 2004, 2007, was the signal that the terrible past under dictatorship came to an end, and that from this moment onwards, the transition towards democracies can be consolidated and can be protected with the common efforts of the whole European institutions, of the whole European Union. And now that all these challenges, peace, democracy and freedom in part of our continent has been reached, now there are new arguments in favor of the European project. We need to be relevant in a world that is being globalized. If we are not more united, better integrated, we will not be relevant. And this is not only a question of power. This is a question of protecting our values and our democratic systems, because part of the relevant players in the present world are not democracies. China is not a democracy, has not the rule of law as a guidance for their collective life. We need to be more integrated to better tackle aging, to better integrate immigrants, to better protect our values when we are dealing with a very difficult crisis and when we have to compete on equal footing with countries, economies, and areas of the world that can compete against our products thanks to lower social conditions and thanks to lower wage levels. So we have a lot of reasons in this new world to push in favor of more Europe. Not only to protect what we have achieved, but to look into the future with more confidence, with more optimism. Europe is about optimism. If we renounce, if we give up in fighting for a better future, probably we will not have the same reasons to fight for more Europe. Europe is about having an ambition to improve the way our citizens today and the next generation will live in this territory. And at the same time, the present looks very grim. Of course, recession in some European economies, low growth in general. The other day in the IMF meetings, there were discussions around the figures of growth across the world, and Europe, and the Euro area in particular, but the whole European Union were the last ones in terms of growth, in terms of levels of employment and reduction of unemployment, because we need to fight still against recession, imbalances, indebtedness. Some of our governments in Europe are cutting public services, are reducing the levels of welfare that were achieved in the past, even if in some of the European countries the level, the size of our welfare state was not still as big as we wished. In this fight against the crisis, in this fight against the consequences of the financial crisis, we have difficult relations within Europe, within the European countries, even within European citizens. There are some positions that revealed selfishness, lack of solidarity. Populism is rising in some of our member states, as you mentioned in your report. Extremism is looming, start to increase in some countries, and not only in the countries undergoing very, very serious adjustments, as can be the case with one extreme right party in Greece, but also in very rich countries within Europe that are the ones that are suffering less the consequences of the crisis. And in those countries also, populism and extremism starts to increase. In general, if we compare the situation now with the situation of the public opinion of our citizens' public opinion 10 years ago, before the crisis, we should recognize that the level of confidence in the democratic institutions, both at the national level and at the EU level, has decreased. And this is a worrying consequence, one of the worrying consequences of the crisis. And of course, uncertainty, fears, tensions, when we look into the future, are present. As I am not very young, this is not the first time that I see this kind of tensions. But probably if I compare the previous crisis and the previous tensions created by economic crisis in the past, during the last 50 years, in this occasion, we can observe more than in any other previous occasion during the last 50 years that we are not only dealing with cyclical obstacles and challenges, at the same time that we need to overcome a recession and a crisis, we are dealing with very important structural changes that require a very serious strategy to cope with those challenges and to succeed. Three aspects of these challenges I want to mention before going directly to your points. First, this crisis has shown that our economic paradigm or economic policy paradigm has serious failures. During the last 20-25 years, we were talking about deregulation. And it's true that we advance more deregulating the financial sector than other parts of our economic activity in most of our countries. Now the crisis has shown us that we should do exactly the opposite. We should increase the way the financial activities are regulated, and we are doing so. And we need to liberate energies in the non-financial parts of our economies. And this means to fight against corporatism, against vested interests, against obstacles that are not due to some common good that deserve our protection. And this is very important for the youth generation. Without removing obstacles in the non-financial part of our economy, a lot of possibilities for entrepreneurship, for finding help to embark in new activities, for taking risks, for having more confidence in the future, for having the confidence that even if the first try will fail, the second or the third one will succeed. We need to remove obstacles. And we have still a lot of obstacles that are due not to any general common good that deserves to be protected, but because of corporatism, vested interest, and selfishness. And it's a very important task. We try to contribute at the European level, trying to build an internal market, a single market. A project that was launched in the mid-80s, that was supposed to be achieved in 1992, but still has a lot of work to be done, in particular in two areas: the services sector, that will provide most of the opportunities to have new jobs and new expectations for the future, services sector, and the digital economy. These are the two new frontiers of the single market process. Financial sector needs to be regulated, is being regulated, but the financial sector needs to be regulated in a way that will not repeat the big mistakes of the past, and among other things, without going into other details, financial sector needs to be able in Europe to finance new initiatives. And this is not the case in most of our countries today with the way the banking system and other financial instruments work. The economic paradigm has always been very important, and in particular macroeconomic. I will not discuss this, but this debate around the euro area policy mix, the euro area strategies, the way to correct and to adjust the imbalances of our economies in the euro area reveals that we have a lot of work to do, and part of this work is being done, and part of this work should be done in the future. But one of the aspects that I want to mention, because it links with education in particular, is the way fiscal consolidation takes place. Because when you have very high levels of debt, public debt, you need to consolidate. You need to put in place a strategy to reduce your level of indebtedness. Nobody will lend to you if you are not able to have a credible fiscal consolidation strategy to reduce gradually the level of debt. And if you are not able to put forward this strategy, you will have less possibilities to borrow and higher prices when someone will lend to you. So this is needed. We should not discuss fiscal consolidation as a need for all those, many countries in Europe, that has excessive levels of debt. But the way to put in place a consolidation strategy in our budgets is extremely important. We cannot consolidate public finances cutting expenditure in education. This is terrible. To find a way to reduce a public deficit, cutting the funds that are channeled towards the education system, is the worst economic policy possible. If we do so, we are killing the future in exchange of buying some cents of the euro for the present. Consolidation is needed, but consolidation should be intelligent, not blind. These some comments on the economic paradigm that needs to be changed. Second, social paradigm. We were very proud until the crisis of our European social model. I remember in 2005, 2006, discussions here at the level of the EU institutions, the Commission, the Council, the Parliament, about our social model. We were very proud. And social differences were being reduced between citizens in many of our countries, not in all, but in many, and social differences, social levels were being reduced between countries. But what this crisis has shown, in my view, is the lack of sensitivity regarding inequalities. The crisis is increasing inequalities very, very quickly. Inequalities in our society are increasing very fast, and we have not the public debate regarding the evolution of inequalities that the situation deserves. I think we need to come back to the discussion, to the debate on inequalities. And the young people are number one regarding those who should be interested in this discussion, because inequalities are terrible. We cannot build the future increasing inequalities in our society, and inequalities are increasing between nationals and immigrants, between employed and unemployed, between employed with good jobs and employed people with bad jobs, between old people and not so old people, between women and men. Too many inequalities exist and are increasing. And this is a big challenge for our societies, to reduce again inequalities and to define our policies to reduce inequalities. And of course, employment and age, together with nationality and gender, probably are the most important cleavages that we need to reduce and to fight against in this society. And the second point regarding inequalities or the lack of solidarity, the lack of sensitivity regarding the divergences that are being created by this crisis, refers to solidarity between countries within Europe. I am still impressed of the lack of sensitivity in some national public opinions regarding the consequences of some decisions in other citizens in other parts of Europe, just because they have a different nationality. This cannot be the base of our future. We need to reduce this inexistence of feelings when the nationals of other member states are the ones who are suffering the consequences of the crisis. This is extremely important in my view. And this links with the third failure, political failure. Of course, and I will not stop there, the Economic and Monetary Union had, in its original design, a lot of wrong systems to ensure the reasonable governance of the Economic and Monetary Union. Of course, the troikas are dealing with very difficult issues and are not being able to deal with high levels of democratic accountability on those issues, to be polite. Our politicians, we politicians, I am also a politician, I think in the future we will be accused of being short-termist, of not having a vision, of trying to deal with the short-term problems of every week, of every ECOFIN Council, of every European Council, of every election date, and not having in mind a broader vision and a deeper vision of what Europe means for all of our citizens. Previous leaders in Europe had this vision beyond the next electoral term. Unfortunately, this is not the case today. And with all these problems, the failures of our economic paradigm, of our economic strategy, the lack of sensitivity for social cleavages, the wrong governance, the short-termism, this is creating, in my view, three different Europes: the northern, the southern, and the eastern. And these are like tectonic plates. And we should avoid the earthquake. And this is my most important worry regarding the future of Europe, is this consequence of other failures, economic, social, political, policy framework failures, that can create the risk of a shock between these three parts of Europe, three different parts of Europe that are living the same reality at the European level in a very different way. This is creating room for nationalism, populism, protectionism, and all kinds of isms, and we need to avoid this. As you said, the social contract is broken. And this is my worry, because it's not only broken in some European countries, it's broken at the European level, in my view. So, what to do? A lot of things. You say many things in your report. I fully agree, and I will not stop on this, on the key importance of education at all levels. Education to improve the awful rates of early leaving from the school, education to improve skills, to improve the instruments of training throughout the working life, improvement of the quality of our high educational levels. In the Commission analysis of this, and the Commission is trying to be active, very active on these issues of education, labor market, training, skills, youth opportunities, with the youth guarantee proposal, with the youth employment package put forward by my colleague Andor. There is a figure, and I will not stop in many other aspects, because you have touched upon many of those very well in your report. But there is one figure that is extremely telling. We have this terrible 50% or more than 50% youth unemployment in Greece and Spain. We have 30 and 35% of youth unemployment in many other countries. And you have some good figures in a few group of countries in Europe. But all in all, those who had very good figures are starting to have shortages in the labor force supply, and they are asking for skilled people going there. And you talk about the risks of brain drain if those who need labor force are trying to absorb the highly skilled labor force, trying to survive in the countries with more unemployment problems. But there is a figure that is not for the next century, is not for the next 30 years, is for the end of this decade. We need millions and millions of skilled people, skilled labor force, to deal with the demand for jobs in the digital sector. And we know it. We know it. And we need to be able to organize the matching between supply and demand in the labor market for this very well-known need of highly skilled labor force in Europe in less than 7 years. And so far, apart the good initiatives adopted by the Commission and being discussed in the Parliament and in the Council, so far most of the actions continues to be national, or even in some federal countries, as my own, regional. But this is not enough. And when the European Council discussed at the beginning of this year youth unemployment, and it's good that the head of the state and government discussed this, they found a fantastic solution with 6 million euros. Little bit taken from the social fund, and a little bit from I don't know where. This is a very, very small amount of money. When someone tries to better organize our resources, economic resources, policy resources, human resources, at the EU level, immediately I know that someone will raise the hand and say, hey, this is national competence. This is not for Europe, it's for us. And this cannot be true. Education, training, preparation of our labor force for the jobs of the future is not only a national task. It needs to be a European task. And many of the consequences of this task, many of the implementation measures, of course, will continue to be national, regional, or local, or to belong to the private sector. But the strategy as such, the discussion of how our challenges in terms of youth unemployment, in terms of skills of our labor force, in terms of expectation for better jobs and opportunities for the future, needs to be at the center of the discussions of the European project. If not, why our citizens will want more Europe? Not all of them are sociologists, economists, historians, or experts in political science. Not all of them are traveling every week to China or to India or to California or to the Silicon Valley. The citizens need to believe that here in Europe, in Brussels, in the European institutions, in the big buildings close to this one, we are dealing and we are discussing with the real challenges they know that they have to face for them and for their children. And this is a very important issue for Europe, to take into account the changes, taking into account the new challenges that needs to be tackled at the European level, and to be able to discuss not legalistic reforms, but the real issues that needs to reconcile Europe with citizens, and citizens with Europe. And it's true, and I will end with this, that politics is very important. And you mentioned the need for young people to participate in politics, and as I'm a member of my political party since many years, I know how difficult it is to get in contact with a political party. It's extremely difficult. You also know. The normal reaction of some people in some political parties, when young people is knocking at the door, is saying, why they want to come here? What they want to discuss with us? Let us, the politicians, to discuss, and let the other people to be outside our headquarters. And this cannot be the reality. But politics is changing. The way to participate in politics, of course, is changing. New technologies, social networks, and all this is changing a lot of things, but the political parties are absolutely needed. Without political parties, there is no parliamentary democracy, and without parliamentary democracy, nothing of these very good intentions and objectives and challenges can be tackled. So, also the discussion of how to modernize the way politics function is a task for you. Maybe for those who are members of the same party during 40 years, it's not an easy task to define how politics had to change. But for you, it should be very easy, because you know, as I know, that politics had to change to achieve all these very good intentions. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for those words about the report and about the much wider discussion. Of course, if the FutureLab participants are trying to prove that these days it's very hard for young people to make their voices heard. You're not making it much easier by coming and accepting their report and giving such an extended response to what they have to say. But unfortunately not every politician takes young people this seriously. We'll move now to the next part of this session. So I would like to invite you to join the stage together with 3 FutureLab Europe participants. I should warn you that the stage is rather precarious, so don't move the seat backwards or there could be dire consequences.
I will be the first. Sit down.
So joining you now on the panel are 3 FutureLab participants. To your left, Heidi Bea from Germany. To your right, Leticia Diaz-Sanchez from Spain. And Theodora Matsipropoulou from Greece. They have prepared a few questions that they are going to put to you. And so I'm going to hand over to them. Is there one of you who would like to start, or shall I just start? Yes, the one.
Yes, I
Theodora's
can
going to start? Okay, Theodora.
Okay.
Thank you for the speech. You talked about the political failure, and I would like to remain on that, because the crisis is not only economical one, but it's institutional as well, and it's a crisis of lack of trust as well. Thank you. I'm very curious how this trust could be restored, since the abstention rates in the elections among young voters are very high, and I would like to listen a comment about that from you.
Right now.
After the first sip, maybe.
Yeah, let me drink a little bit. So, how we can fight against abstention in the European elections, or in general?
And in the national, of course.
Well, I have not the full receipt in 5 minutes, but I think, according to my experience, starting by Europe, the European elections campaign that I remember were a series of political meetings and debates about national issues. The European issues were only dealt by experts and legalistic constructions regarding the qualified majority voting, or the way to tackle the democratic deficit from the constitutional point of view, or some kind of things. And in general, the citizens, the voters, thought that the real important issues for their lives, for their future, for their ambitions, were not at stake in this election, so they considered that their votes were not so important. Or in some cases, they considered that they can approach the polling station and to vote for a very weird candidate, because these elections were not so relevant as the national ones or the local ones. At the national level, well, I tend to think, but maybe it's my experience more in Spanish politics than in other countries, that the electoral system needs to be adapted, because the blocked lists of candidates presented by each political party are not the most attractive signal for voters to go to send the vote. Political parties tend to have in mind other kind of considerations, and not only the list of the best candidates possible to be offered to the voters. And second, the kind of debates, political debates, are not mainly centered in the real issues, in the real alternatives to the real issues, but in many occasions in internal fights against parties, or in some cases within a particular party. And these kind of things are not interesting for 90% of the citizens. But is my view. I think a better quality of the political debate, and I think the media and the online possibilities offer a lot of opportunities to improve this. a good selection of candidates, some choice for voters when they vote to one candidate and not other candidates, and to discuss the real issues at stake at every level of election. These can be my initial recommendations.
I very much appreciate that you are here for our debate on this topic. I interpret it for myself as a sign that you're very committed, that you're very interested in the fate of young people in Europe. And I see also that the European level has a great sensitivity of this subject, much more than some national politicians, I feel that. I'm not sure if you're like in after the Arab Spring, you're afraid of us, yeah, of the European youth, and that's why you address this. But no, well, yeah, but as also my colleagues like James and Enya mentioned, a lot of people in Europe, young people, feel somehow betrayed from the system because somehow the European project promised an active civil society, freedom, as you also mentioned, is like a very big issue. And also the capitalism and the free market system promised some wealth and some prosperity and chances. And now, you know it probably better than I know because I'm from Germany. In Spain and in Greece, the situation for many young people is not very encouraging, let's say. And that's why I also see that while you established the youth guarantee, which I see it's a sign also, but you also already said it's just a very little money, yeah. And I'm also not sure if you yourself trust the young people and the young generation, or in generally maybe also the European people when you suggest a youth guarantee, which means a guarantee maybe for jobs or for trainings, yeah. Shouldn't the young people in Europe be able to bring themselves out of the crisis, out of their situation themselves? What do you think?
You say a lot of things. First of all, nothing to do with the Arab Spring, believe me. If I were here 4 or 5 years ago, well, the crisis had started, not yet the Arab Spring, I would have said more or less the same things, based on European experience. I would like more European springs. And, the youth guarantee and all these kind of measures. As I am not too young, I remember when I was involved in national politics, representing my party, I was participating in some European discussions here in Europe or in Luxembourg or in Strasbourg. And we were talking in 1997 of a youth guarantee. And some member states have achieved the existence of a good youth guarantee scheme, and together with other elements of their strategies for the good functioning labor market, for a good functioning economy, for good educational systems with good youth strategies, they have reached fantastic results in terms of youth employment and very, very low youth unemployment. But in many other cases, the idea of the youth guarantee that was put forward in '97 was not implemented because of lack of resources, because of lack of urgencies, and now cannot be implemented because, as you said and I said, there is a very, very tiny amount of EU money for this, and at the national level, the countries with highest levels of youth unemployment usually don't have the public resources to finance this youth guarantee. And even they don't have the adequate instruments in the labor market institutions to well organize this youth guarantee. In any case, this is not the final, the real solution to the challenges of youth employment and youth expectations towards the future. You mentioned the precarious jobs, this very quick transition between a trainship, temporary job, unemployment, going outside our house with our parents, going back to the parents' house because I cannot pay the lawyer and the rent. This will not be solved by a youth guarantee. The youth guarantee will help to go through a very difficult period, of course. If training and the job experience is well organized, this will improve the expectations of having a good job in the future, but the good job will come for a sound economic functioning of your national economy. It would come for a good institutional setup, not only of the labor market, but also of the product market, services market, the way entrepreneurship can be successful in an institutional environment, in a financial environment. There are a lot of things that needs to help for a good opportunity for the young people to have a stable future and a better future. Many things, not only one. The confidence on politics and institutions. Well, it's true that the system is not delivering what we ask the system to give us. But this is not only a problem of the youth, it's also a problem of us, everybody. At any level of age, we want a system that will give us more things. That we want a better market economy. We want to tackle the market failures. We want to have an efficient public system. We want to avoid the waste of taxpayers' money. We want to avoid abuses. We want to avoid, of course, corruption. We need more transparency. We have a lot of things to do, but this is not only for the youth. What I would like is that the youth will be actively working for this. And how to do so is not easy, but we need it. In many occasions, in other springs, in other periods of our history in many European countries, the most important reforms and the most important achievements were not achieved by people with 70 years old or 75 years old. Were achieved by people in the 30s. So we need you. It's not only what we can offer to you or what we can give you. That, of course, we need to create the conditions, but you have to be there also. If not, nobody will solve your problems if you are not there. Everybody will try to solve, first of all, their own problems. This is in the human nature. And we need much more active participation of young people. And this is not a fight against generations or between generations. I hate the generational struggles. It's not about one single generation that will do everything and the others that will receive everything. And I would like even to discuss this lost generation concept. 1/3 of the generation can be lost. The other 2/3 should help the 1/3 that is worst off to overcome the difficulties.
Right. I'm not sure this is working. Yeah? Okay. Good afternoon. Thanks for coming here and giving us this speech. I would like to ask you something about this motivation for young people to work in Europe and to work on solving these terrible issues, because you rightly said that actually the crisis, the economic crisis and unemployment is something affecting all generations, not only the young ones. But on the other side, it seems that Eurosceptic feeling is more likely to offend young people, because all the people, all the generations, still have got this view of EU meaning democracy, freedom, peace, or even economic innovation in countries like Spain or Portugal coming out of a dictatorship before joining the EU. Whereas young generations don't really have this view anymore. It's too remote for them. And you said before that there are now new arguments for young people to believe in Europe, such as gaining relevance in a globalized world. But it doesn't seem that a globalized world is delivering what young people expect from it, because young people of course, they've got values and principles they would like to see represented in a global, at the global level, but they cannot make a living out of values and principles. They need some more specific motivation, which probably all the generations had and could feel more personally, because peace, prosperity, innovation was something more particularly affecting them in a personal level. So what would you say that young people should have as a motivation to fight for this, or as what kind of values, principles, what kind of personal motivation should they have?
Well, as I said, on the one hand, to support the European project, to believe in Europe, as you said, means to embrace the objectives that Europe has achieved and to want to protect these achievements and not to put them at risk. Peace, democracy, freedom, human rights, welfare. This requires active protection. This will not be there forever, and this crisis is reminding us that this is not there forever, that we need to protect this. And this is the task for all Europeans, and in particular for the youth, provided that they will be living more time, that they will live in more time in the future Europe than we. So you are more interested than us. But there are new challenges. Well, immigration, for instance. We know that because of aging, we will need to organize our societies based on a much more diverse composition than in the past. This is a task for you. You prefer to live in a city as Brussels when you move from one commune to other commune and you think that you have crossed the Gibraltar, Detroit, going from Europe to Africa? Or you want to live in a decent society, in a decent city? Climate change. Nobody else will be more worried by the horrible consequences of climate change than the youngsters that will live more and more years in this world that we are destroying. What else? Many reasons of the world that we need to build deserves action, deserves political action, public action. This will not be solved by the market. The market has a lot of efficiencies and a lot of values, but these are not values that can be solved by the market. And the next question is, well, and these big challenges of our future as young people can be tackled better if the Maltese will act alone, or the Spanish will act alone, or the Greek will act alone, or the British will act alone, or we have this fantastic platform that is Europe that deserves to be reinforced to help us to be more efficient in this fight. And I think the answer is very clear. In my view, there are much less reasons to be nationalistic or protectionist now than 50 years ago. It's my belief. But I think this is in your interest even more than in my own interest, because I will be here less time than you. Not in this room, but in this world.
Thank you. Let me just see now if there's any questions in the room before we go back to the panel for a second round of questions. Yes, Irma. Do we have a microphone? Yes, over there.
Mr. Vice President, first of all, I wish to thank you for coming and joining us today. My name is Irma Zolic. I come from Bosnia and Herzegovina. And my question is actually related to the enlargement process and the countries of the Western Balkans. I fully agree with you when you say that young people should be of this change and encourage other young people when it comes to youth unemployment. I'm sure that you're also aware that the percentages of youth unemployment in the countries of Western Balkans are extremely high. And then we see the percentages in some European countries which are also not encouraging. Then how do we convince our peers in a way to be the leaders of this European process and the process of European integration when we mention, and they know, this lack of solidarity between the countries of the European Union, And when they see the percentages and how the young people in some EU countries are actually living and how they're unemployed, also homeless sometimes, although they are very highly educated. So I would like your opinion kind of in this matter.
When in all the experiences of EU enlargement, since the first one in 73, past century, with UK, Ireland and Denmark, after Greece, immediately after Greece, Spain and Portugal, put into brackets Sweden, Austria, Finland, because they were highly industrialized countries. But the next big enlargement, 2004 and 2007, in all the cases, the disparities of GDP per capita, of opportunities, of welfare has been reduced thanks to the enlargement. In all cases, even now, even during the crisis, the regional and national disparities between the newcomers in 2004-2007 and the old members of the European Union have continued to decrease. So the horizon to become member of the European Union is a fantastic opportunity to reduce the gap, not to eliminate the gap, but to reduce the gap. It's a fantastic opportunity for those governments who are leading the process of negotiating with the EU and trying to become finally members of the EU. And I know how difficult is the negotiation. I participated in the negotiation of my own country accession. It was very difficult. I made a lot of friends during this negotiation, but I remember that it was a very difficult negotiation, sometimes painful negotiation. But this helped all the candidate countries to put forward reforms that in any case are needed to ensure their development, the improvement in the quality of life, better protection of human rights, and more solidity of the democratic institutions in all cases. It's true that in some few cases, after the enlargement, after the accession, there have been some backward evolutions. And we have now some examples, hopefully, and sadly. But I think this is an extremely good opportunity to use this opportunity not only to discuss the tariffs of steel industries and the way the shipyards should be transformed and modernized, but it's extremely good opportunity to advance and to accelerate the reforms that in any case are needed to improve the welfare, the quality of the democracy, the human rights, the protection of freedoms, and many, many other things. So this is good. The problem, in any case, is what happens the day after the accession. Because if you, your country, your authorities, your politicians, your leaders, give up of the effort to continue the modernization, to continue the catching up at all levels, in this case, this would be painful once you have become member of the EU. And we have some examples. Not only on the political level, can be the case right now in Hungary, for instance, but also at the economic level, and we have, in this case, not only one, but several examples. But all in all, I think it's extremely positive opportunity that needs to be used as the most important leverage you will have to modernize and to live in a country that will be better than before.
Thank you. I saw quite a few hands, so maybe we can take 2 or 3 questions together. Is that okay? Georgi, Stephen, yeah, and then we'll take you. Yeah.
Hello, thanks for the brilliant speech. My name is Georgi Michev from Bulgaria. I'm one of the FutureLab fellows and also co-author of the publication. My question is related to how we can improve the link and the cooperation between business and young people. Also business, young people and academia to cope with the problem with the lost generation in Europe and in all our countries. Thank you.
Hello, my name is Stephen Kool. I'm from the Netherlands and from Germany. And the question...
2 countries?
2 countries. I have 2 passports.
Okay.
So, but what I wanted to ask you, and you were very well aware that Europe is aging. Many countries have, in a couple of years, a majority of people above the age of 60. Now, how is the youth supposed to be making a democratic voice when they are a minority within the most of the European Union? Thank you.
Okay, and one more question in the back over there.
Hello, my name is Laurent Hubert. I'm a young entrepreneur from Belgium. I have a few thoughts according to what you said.
Briefly, please.
Yes, briefly. First being that you were talking about one Europe and that we are going closer to each other. Still, if you take Romania, Italy, Germany, Spain, it's 4 different countries, 4 different models. So how is Europe going to use all the strengths of these different countries to help create a better model? And then more skeptically, you were talking about politicians and the importance of creating more debate and integrate youth. But when you look at Europe, politicians, it's always the same parties who come. It's going more and more into socialism, populism is the right word. The social pact is being destroyed. There is more and more poverty. There is more gap between wealth. There is more gap in employment. Crisis. Do you think we are going to get out of this crisis, or it's just going to fall for something new to come? Thank you.
Vice President.
No. Well, first of all, your first question, how to better integrate or put in contact business, academia, and youth. There are some good examples of interaction between universities or research centers and the business community to encourage innovation, to encourage the transmission of scientific results towards a productive system. There are some, if I can mention at least one in Europe, Cambridge. It's a fantastic experience of a cluster of research, innovation, business, and there are a lot of youngsters working there, but it's not the only one in Europe. It's the one that I knew summer that I was spending there in Cambridge, but it's not the only one. Again, this kind of networks open doors from the academia to business without fearing that business will privatize and hijack the research and the academic analysis and opening the door to young people coming from the universities to be integrated in the research and innovation networks, I think is one of the experiences that we need to develop and to promote indeed. But I am not at all an expert. There are very good experiences in Europe. In Europe, we are not at all bad in producing research results. In Europe, seems to be the difficulty to put these research results in the market. So the transmission towards the market has, according to the experts in this field, some failures. And in my direct responsibility as Commissioner for Competition, we are now discussing the new framework for state aid to research, development, and innovation. And we are trying to find the way to declare compatible some kind of public support to avoid these deadlocks and to remove these obstacles in the transmission of research results towards business. If this is the case, business will be more active in funding research, and we can increase our figures on percentage of our GDP channel to research and development. That is very, very low if we compare our figures with average figures in Europe with US or with Japan or with other countries. And probably if we don't improve seriously this ratio, research and development expenditure in relation with GDP, before the end of this decade, China will overcome us. The electoral considerations. Well, I don't fear this. Aging is a very important discussion and has a lot of challenges, and we can draw a lot of conclusions of the analysis of the aging of our populations, indeed. But from the electoral point of view, my worry would be if the retired people will organize their own parties to fight against the youth, and the youth people, the youngsters, will organize their own parties to fight against the old people. In the second part, I would be a victim. In the first part, I think would be completely unfair. So this is a question of kind of pact among generations. It's the only way to build a society for the future, is to have a good intergenerational dialogue and solidarity, intergenerations. The third point, well, I like diversity in Europe, as I like diversity within my own country. I don't know, you are Belgian, you know the diversity here, but in my own country I like very much diversity, provided that this will not represent an obstacle to act together, not only at the national level, but at the European level. So, in my view, the diversity in Europe is not a liability, it's an asset, provided that we have a clear idea of what kind of Europe we want, and we have the adequate strategies to promote stronger Europe in the areas where Europe should be strong. The other considerations, more political, well, I don't share. What I try to understood from your definition of the problem, I don't share. I am a socialist and I am not a populist. So I cannot identify one thing and the other.
Thank you. The members of the panel, do you have a...
Theodora, you will go. Thank you. You referred before to a consequence of the crisis that the lost generation faces, and has to do with the return back home, back to the mom and dad foundation that many people have to compromise with, which is quite hard at the same time to see your life ruined and you have to face this new reality. And I would like to ask you how we will see this generation blooming again after some years and doing their own start their own family, start their own job. Is it gonna happen? Because I feel weird with this backward.
It depends on us. Depends on you and me and everybody who has some kind of responsibility or capacity to adopt initiatives in the good way. I am optimistic. I recognize the difficulty of the present. As I said, the present is grim, but I am optimistic because I think we have the human resources, we have the human capacity, we have the collective will to overcome this situation. I remember in previous periods, I remember also discussions about lost generations, about high unemployment. It's true that in this occasion, the crisis is more structural than in previous ones. So we need to figure out more reforms. And we need to be more ambitious and less conservative in the kind of solutions we put forward. But I am optimistic. I remember in other occasions during my life, discussions about lost generations, and in a few years' time, those who supposedly belonged to the lost generation were in government, and very powerful governments. So don't worry. Don't be passive. Don't be passive and don't worry.
I also agree with you with lost generation. I think after the Second World War it might be also a very serious situation, and I'm also not sure if you can compare it to the situation today of the European youth. But and I'm also an optimist as you are, but I also want to ask you something about some reality I saw through media. You were saying that some countries absorb the labor force from other countries, and there's an example, like in Germany, there are working a lot of Bulgarians, also Spanish people, and they don't really live their life, like they live actually a life beyond humanity, I would say, because they get very little, like very small wages, and they have bad working conditions. They sometimes lack health insurance, and companies take advantage from this situation that in their home countries the wages are smaller and there are no opportunities. So what would you say, what can you do to improve these people's situation? And I think it's a European issue. It should be solved also on the European level.
Well, I remember when I came to Brussels first, was in 1972. As a young economist to work here, my country, Spain, was not member of the EU because at that time was a dictatorship. Well, I was working here, and I don't remember how my situation was defined at the time. I was not in exile, as many compatriots who were here, exiled after the civil war in Spain. I was not a traditional immigrant because I was an economist, so I was not badly paid. But I was not European from the citizenship viewpoint because my country was not member of the EU. Okay, it was a different situation, but I remember at that time I couldn't consider my situation as difficult as the one the exiled people or the immigrants that came here in the 60s to work in the coal mines or in the building sector. Now, I came back in 2004, 9 years ago, as a commissioner, and I discovered a new definition of professional people working in a different country. We were expats. It's a different category. I tend to think, and I hope that this is closer to the reality, that many young people with academic degrees, university degrees, going from Spain to Germany or coming here or going to the UK or to the US are more expats than immigrants in the traditional point of view. I tend to think so because being member of the EU, you have a lot of rights that are protected by our common laws at the EU level. You have more opportunities to find jobs because you have good educational levels. In any case, the reason they are coming here or going to Germany is because they didn't have the opportunity in their own country. So even if they are not in a very, very good position, they are in a less worse position than if they stay in their country and living with their parents and looking for a job and not finding a job, only a very, very temporary and precarious job. But in any case, the question for this kind of people is when they will have the possibility to come back. If they want to come back to their country, they can or they cannot. And this is, in my view, the real issue, the possibility to decide where you want to work. Because to move across Europe, finding new opportunities, knowing new experiences, meeting with different people but of your same area with the same values is a very good experience on the one hand. But at the same time, not to be able to come back when you want to your own country is a very bad experience. So this is my question. When I look at in my own family, people from with 30 years old, living abroad, working abroad, my question is not in the first time, they are suffering because they are not in their country during 1 year? Probably not. They will suffer in 5 years' time if they cannot come back to their own country, yes. And this is a real challenge for our young generation being obliged during this crisis to move abroad. This is my worry.
I'm going to ask you something rather practical. We've been discussing about education matters and also about employment, and I would like to ask you something about something in between, which is internships. It happens now that because of the crisis and because so many young people are unemployed, they are very willing to take up any position as intern, underpaid or even unpaid, even though they are overqualified to do this kind of internship. It seems to me that many of you will know that that's quite common in Brussels, and many of you will have probably gone through this period personally. Don't you think that the EU should do something at EU level in order to regulate this so much abuse that it's been happening, and it's happening also in Brussels, which is the headquarters of the EU?
Yes, indeed. I know, I have in my cabinet always a traineeship. In the Commission system, every year, 2 generations of traineeships come to the Commission, and I always want to have one from the blue book of the Commission, and usually another one from a member state system that also can come to the Commission to have an experience. And 5 months experience is fantastic. 6 months experience, okay, fantastic. I may say, regardless what you will get as a salary, 6 months of experience working in a good working environment, I think it's a very good experience. 1 year, 1 year and a half without being paid, or being paid a very, very small amount of money, with awful working conditions, receiving workload for the weekends is clearly an abuse, and I agree. I think Europe should regulate these things. I agree. And in my life, I've been analyzing in many occasions CVs from young people, and I was always terrified looking at some starting of professional life, traineeship, 6 months work, back home, unemployed during the 5 months, another traineeship, another work. This is not possible. We need to change this. This is not a training period. This is an awful, I don't know the word in English, exploitation. Exploitation. Yeah.
Thank you. I think we've got time for one last round of questions before we conclude. So, Nora.
Thank you. Hi, my name is Nora, and I'm an expat and a previous trainee, and I'm a member of the FutureLab network. And I've got a question for you regarding what you said in your keynote speech about the way politics and political parties should work, and they should be modernized to have parliamentary democracy to be able to tackle the challenges that we're facing today in Europe. And I'd like to point out that on the European level, the political parties have modernized in a way that nowadays you can become an associate member, like on an individual level, call it associate membership or activism or however. And I know that there are lower membership fees for youth, for under 30-year-olds. So not all political parties are thinking, what are these young people doing knocking on our doors? So, and then there's also been talk about a common European candidate for the Commission presidency, and also about transnational lists in the European Parliament elections. And my question would be that, would you see these actions, if ever implemented, and the role of European political parties as an instrument to fix the democratic deficit and to legitimize the European project for its citizens and for the youth?
Can I take a few together, and then we can round up? Question in the back.
Hello, my name is Daniel. I'm coming from Romania. I don't have a question. I have a message for young people, and I would like to tell that a generation should not be seen only from an economic point of view, and I don't think we're a lost generation. I think we should be searching for our meaning, and yeah. So please reflect on what you aspire to. Thank you.
Thank you. One more question. Yes, Lucas.
Hi, my name is Lucas Brück. I'm from Germany, and I wanted to come back to Heidi's question concerning labor force coming from Southern Europe to Germany. There was a big case in the media about Amazon before Christmas this year in Germany, where Southern European employees were exploited in a really dire way. And my question is, you were saying they have the chance to go back to Southern Europe if they don't want to work there, perhaps in theory, but in practice, as lack of social security, do you really think they have a chance to decide whether they want to work in those dire situations or they want to go back? So my question is, don't you think there's some kind of need to protect those working poor?
Well, indeed, indeed. But I was not referring to working conditions. I think every human being, young, medium age, or old, deserves decent working conditions, of course, according to the kind of task that they are performing, according to their qualifications, according to the conditions of those who are working with them in the same place, of course. What I was saying is a different thing, not linked with the working conditions in Germany or in Norway or in Brussels, is that it's very different if under normal working conditions in a country where you were obliged to go because there were no jobs in your own country, if you know that in a reasonable period of time, 2-3 years, if you want, you have the possibility to come back, maybe you won't, and you would prefer to stay in Mannheim or in Hamburg. But if you want to go to Malaga instead of living in Hamburg, you need to have the possibilities, and we need to work to create opportunities for a young lady born in Malaga that went to Hamburg, even if the work in Hamburg is very decent, to come back to Malaga because it's a sunny city and there is a big beach where you can eat pescadillo. So the same as a German guy going to Alicante as a tourist guide, if he's fed up of the Alicante weather, it's very warm and he's bored, and he prefers to go to München to see the Bayern play there every 15 days, they should have the right to go back to München. It's a normal right to decide where you want to live and work.
Yeah, but it's not about the right, it's about the chances.
The chances, my point about the solidarity not only within every member state but across Europe, is that if the differences in opportunities and in expectations to find a decent work are very different in different member states in Europe, the whole European member state should be concerned by this. It's not a question of Spaniards to have a higher unemployment in Spain than in France. It's also a question of the French, and of the Germans, and of the Swedish. So I think if we are Europeans, we need to feel like Europeans, and we need to be to have compassion with the problems of other Europeans, regardless if they have our own passport or the different passport. Is my point.
But how do we protect that they are not exploited in another country?
Well, when I was here working as an economist, I belonged to a union, a Belgian union, and they protected me. I have the right to be member of a trade union that will protect you, or the legislation that, in my view, at the EU level, should have a social minima guarantee for everybody. The EU political parties, you ask. Well, in what I know from my own political family, we are not yet there. Formally, we have a party of European Socialists, but this is not a political party as my own national party. This is a different kind of organization, a different kind of relationship between the members of the party, the intermediate responsibles, and the top leadership. Is a different one. If I ask in my own political party in Spain, who is the leader of the PSOE, almost everybody will say the name, even if some of them will not support the leader. If I ask in my own political party, what is the name of the leader of the Party of European Socialists? If I get 5% of right responses, I would be very happy. In the European campaign, as I said before, up until now, the European campaign, at least in what I know, is more a national campaign than a real European campaign. In this occasion, because the importance of European level challenges and problems, probably we will have a more European campaign. Probably, hopefully. But to have a European campaign, one condition is to focus the debate on the real issues at stake. And I think in this case, in next year, the situation will improve from this point of view. We need to have candidates, and we need to avoid the temptation in some countries that the candidates for the European Parliament are partially, at least, people that the leaders of this party want to expel from the national politics. And every political family should have a candidate, and a candidate for what? Candidate for the presidency of the European Commission, in my view. And I can add more things. I would like very much that the next team of the European Commission will be composed 100% by people elected as members of the European Parliament, even if to become commissioner they have to resign as members of the European Parliament. But I think it would be very good that we commissioners would have an electoral legitimacy before becoming commissioners. I think it would be good.
Thank you very much. Leads me to one follow-up question, but if you think it's so important that the different political groups have a candidate for president of the Commission, is that something that you yourself would consider on behalf of the Socialists?
No.
Martin Schulz can rest assured.
I can promise you that I will assure him.
Thank you very much. I think it's been an extremely lively, instructive debate, very wide-ranging. In very large part thanks to your introductory comments, Vice President. I think you've really taken the young people here today, but also the young people who are listening via the website and who will hear the outcome of this debate seriously by responding to their questions and addressing all the issues they put on the table. There's a lot more, of course, that can be discussed and will be discussed in different debates. We'd like to thank, of course, all of you in the audience for coming here today. I'd like to thank the panelists, the presenters of the report, and of course also the EPC staff and the Scotland House staff who made all of this possible today. We would now like to invite you to join us for a drink outside the room, and we hope to see you again at a future FutureLab Europe event. Thank you very much.